The survey page is probably the most interesting one. Here, you can define the questions and prompts that will be shown to your participants. ODIN supports multiple types of questions. By default, they all have a tag, which is for internal use only, and most of them also have a question field, which is what the participants will see when they show up. We can add a multiple choice question, for which we can set the minimum and maximum number of choices, one of several randomization types, and even a none of the above option, which will automatically uncheck everything above it when selected. You can add choices on existing multiple choice questions, edit the question, and even create a full copy. By themselves, questions only define a theoretical prompt, but in order to determine how and when these prompts should be shown to participants, we must add a rule. Each question can have many rules, each of which will define a context, a situation that should trigger the display of the prompt to the user. If we press the Add Rule button, we will be presented with a full list of all possible rules for our study. Notice that some of these rules depend on sensors, so they will only show up if you have those sensors in your study. Another important thing to note is that not all rules work on both Android and iOS, so keep an eye out for the corresponding icons. The most basic type of rule is the upon recurring time interval one, which tells ODIN to display the target question at a set time interval. Rules can also be configured to run on the server or the participant's phone. For most use cases, the latter is the best choice. In this case, we will configure the rule to trigger every hour at minute 5. If you're familiar with cron strings, you can specify yours directly. Otherwise, we recommend you use the user-friendly control on the left. Aside from these time-specific options, most rules will ask you to specify a maximum number of seconds to display the question for and a set of participant groups, a concept we will go over later in this tutorial. A rule can also have filters, which allow you to add additional conditions to your context. For instance, you can make a time rule that fires every day at 10 a.m. only if the participant is currently in a specific location. Here, though, we will add a time interval filter, which will make it so that our rule only shows up between 10 a.m. and noon. Paired with the schedule specified in the previous section, this means that the question will only show up at 10:05 and 11:05. If we hit Save, the rule and its filter will show up as an English description on the question's card. We can, of course, edit the rule. For instance, let's broaden the filter's range to allow a few more hours. Another important kind of rule is the follow-up, rules that make a question show up based on the answer to another question. To demonstrate this kind of rule, though, we need another question to trigger from. So, let's add a fill text one. In this case, we will ask the user to expand on the reply to the multiple choice question whenever they've selected the something else option. Once again, having a question means little if we don't add a rule for it to trigger. In this case, we will select a follow-up rule, which now shows up as enabled on the list. Given the high responsiveness required for this type of rule, only the phone platform is available. On the parameters of the rule, we can specify a delay to wait for before showing the follow-up, a question to trigger, and a set of choices from that question to trigger off of. You may notice that we have a few more choices than we specified in the Feeling Now question. These are special options that ODIN uses to encode some particular scenarios, namely, skipped, which means the user actively decided to skip the question, expired, which means the question's duration elapsed, and unset, which encodes odd scenarios, like the phone being turned off while the question is waiting to be answered. Since we only want this fill text question to show up whenever they've selected the something else option, we will only leave that on. In this case, we will select no filters and just press Save. That's everything we will cover for the survey page, but there are many other types of questions, rules, and filters you can use. We encourage you to experiment with the options, and when in doubt, refer to our integrated and external docs.